Members of the Caney Indigenous Spiritual Circle regularly celebrate ceremonies in the months of March and September that honor the power of creation, generosity, and nurturing associated with Mother Earth and her identification with the ancient Taino maternal Sami, Atabe. This ceremony is called Equinox ceremony. It is celebrated 2 times during the year, on or about March 21st, when it is known as Spring Equinox, and again on or about September 21st, when it is called Autumn Equinox or Fall Equinox. Because the equinox ceremonies of spring and autumn celebrate the powerful generosity of the divine matriarch who can bring about life and who can also nurture life and promote life as a mother, we in the Caney Circle understand that the balance of these 2 important ceremonies must focus on the maternal female essence of cosmic consciousness. These 2 ceremonies not only celebrate the divine woman, they celebrate all women. That is the reason why the most important elements of the spring equinox and the autumn equinox are manifested by women and girls. We base the facts of the Caney Circle Autumn Equinox ceremony in September on what we know of ancient Taino tradition. It is now a well-recognized fact that the ancient Taino people understood the 4 important positions of the sun in the sky that mark the spring and autumn equinoxes, as well as the summer and winter solstices. They were able to predict those 4 positions accurately and celebrated them with ceremony.
Our ancestors continued their astronomical observations. They established links between those celestial manifestations and the climate changes that manifest during the 4 seasons of the year.
They noticed also the changes that manifest themselves in the night sky, how the movements of the stars shift during the night, and the differences that reveal themselves from spring to summer to fall to winter, and the constellations that shine each night in the tropical sky. These observations of the seasons and the movements of the heavenly bodies influence their beliefs and traditions at a fundamental level.
The Taino ancestors observed that throughout the year, the arch that the sun traces across the dome of the sky each day changes gradually from day to day. In other words, the place where the sun would emerge, the hill, or the tree from behind which the solar disk would rise on a spring morning, was not the same place where it would rise on a summer morning, and then it would rise from behind a different hill or tree in the autumn and winter. These differences indicated to the Taino ancestors how to recognize in which season of the year they happened to be. On a spring morning, the sun would rise from behind a specific mountain, and its trek across the sky from east to west took a specific path. On a summer morning, the sun would rise from behind a different mountain, and its path across the sky was also different. These differences in the path of the sun's daily trek across the sky can be defined in this manner. The arch of the sun's daily journey always begins in the east at dawn and ends in the west at dusk. This happens every day without fail. But in the winter, the Taino ancestors observed that this arch was tilted dramatically towards the south. It is as if the sun itself had traveled south during the death season of winter. After the day of the winter solstice, the arch traced by the sun daily across the sky began to rise gradually, a little bit more each day, bringing the sun back higher towards the north, returning, journeying back, bringing with it the season of life, of rebirth, the season of the rains, the spring season. After the spring equinox, the arch of the sun continues to rise gradually higher and higher into the sky each day. This arch finally reaches a point on a certain day in May when the sun actually travels straight across the very top of the sky, passing right over our heads. The Taino ancestors would have to look straight up to see the sun on that day. This is now known as the zenith passage of the sun, and it occurs only in the tropics. In the Caribbean, the sun's journey continues to move north after the day of the zenith passage in May. The arch continues to tilt further and further towards the north until it reaches the extreme end of its inclination. This happens around June 21st and is called summer solstice. That day is the farthest that the sun's arch will travel north, and happens to be the longest day and shortest night of the year. After the summer solstice, the arch of the sun across the sky begins to go back again towards the south. There's another zenith passage in July or August, during which the sun passes straight over our heads, and then after that, the arch keeps tilting towards the south, farther and farther, eventually reaching the point of the autumn equinox in September. That first day of autumn in September marks the time during which some of the food plants of the Taino Conuco, such as maize, begin to be harvested. This is the beginning of the season of death, during which certain plants, representing the vegetable spirit of life, yokahu, sacrifice themselves to realize their destiny as life-giving food that feeds the human generations. Yokahu dies in the fall, and his soul begins its journey back to the maternal uterus of the Great Mother Atabe. This uterus resides in the inner recesses of the terrestrial underground. Yokahu's soul travels through the sacred caves, entering into the interior of the symbolic body of Atabe. Finally, the arch of the sun reaches its extreme southern inclination again. That day is the winter solstice, the shortest day and longest night. On that day, the soul of Yokahu reaches its goal deep in the underworld. It reaches the womb of the Great Mother Atabe and attaches itself to the uterine wall, turning into a divine fetus, which will then gestate there, awaiting its eventual rebirth. On that first day of the rainy season, Yokahu is born anew and begins the yearly cycle all over again.
The womb of Atabe was often imaged by the ancients in the ovoid, pear-shaped form of a human uterus, and was associated closely with the totem animal of the Supreme Mother, the serpent. Maha, the sacred boa constrictor, is the holy animal, coiled and represented by the ancients in their stone oval sculptures. Its pear-shaped reflects the shape of the human womb and indicates the fertility of the cosmic matriarch, a fertility that is magnificently manifested in the 28-day cycle of the moon.
the divine menses.
The traditional sculptured hoops, typically known as stone collars by archaeologists who studied the art of ancient Tainos, are known as koa hoops by us in the Caney Circle. We understand these hoops, which have been discovered in Taino archaeological sites all over the Caribbean, to be representations of the pear-shaped form of a human uterus. They also are a representation of a coiled snake. Current scholars, as well as many contemporary Tainos, agree that the ancient Taino used these hoops in ceremony. One of the most important elements of that ceremony was to tie a three-point semi-sculpture to the hoop. An important stone hoop kept at the National Museum of the American Indian is maintained with just such a three-point semi tied to it. It is a well-accepted fact that snakes were held in high esteem by the elders and medicine men and women of the ancient Tainos. Snakes were recognized as an important totem animal of the cosmic matriarch Atabe, the Earth Mother, the Water Mother. We in the Caney Circle understand that snakes, with their obvious association to the earth, spend their whole lives hugging and caressing the surface of the soil with their bodies. It is that intimate association between snakes and the earth that indicates them as a representative animal for Atabe, the earth spirit. The ancient Tainos viewed the serpent as female. That is why the koa hoop is a coiled snake and a human womb at the same time. Evidence of the importance of snakes in Taino symbolic lexicon is made clear in the many sculptures that those people created representing snakes. We in the Caney Circle have been inspired by the ancient ancestors to express the sacred essence of the serpent as a representative of the cosmic woman and a symbol of her generosity during the spring and autumn equinox through a ritual called the boa constrictor dance. The spring equinox ceremony celebrates the power of the earth to give birth to the new plants during the rainy season of spring, when the young shoots of the newly planted crops emerge from the soil as if born of the earth's womb. The generosity of Mother Earth is also celebrated at autumn equinox, when some of the crops begin to be harvested, when the sacred food plants must be uprooted and die to give sustenance to the people. This time of death is also a moment of generosity, when the Great Mother offers her son, the food plant spirit, Yokahu, as a sacrifice so that humans can live. These two great ceremonies, spring equinox and autumn equinox, are part of the greater cycle of birth, maturity, death, divine pregnancy, and rebirth that define the life cycle of Yokahu, the Lord of Life, son of Atabe, the cosmic matriarch.
Because, like us, he is a living being. He is born at spring equinox. He rises to full maturity at summer solstice. Then, during the autumn season, he wanes and dies like the harvested plant. His soul descends to the depths of the earth, back to Atabe's underworld belly. At winter solstice, his spirit bonds with the divine womb to gestate there until it is ready to be born again at the next spring equinox.
So in fact, what we are celebrating at the two equinox ceremonies is Atabe's generosity. At the spring equinox, we celebrate her generosity that manifests itself in the power of birth as new life emerges from the ground. At the autumn equinox, we celebrate her generosity as she gives her son the spirit of plant food to us so that we can live. In ancient Taino tradition, the women did all the planting and cultivating. They also did all the harvesting and food preparation. Many indigenous people of the tropical rainforests of South America, where the ancestors of the Taino came from, still live by that cyclic rhythm. The boa constrictor dance begins with a special ritual in which the women weave the body of the snake out of cotton ropes hanging from an overhead support. The arrangement of the women holding on to their individual ropes is a circle around a specially pre-selected woman who sits at the center of the circle in a chair. The chosen woman takes her place at the center of the circle and sits down in her chair. Each one of the women standing in a circle around her grabs the end of a hanging rope until all the ropes being held by these women create a circular cone pattern over the head of the center woman. Although these images present a rural tree-lined outdoor scene, it is important to understand that this ceremony, like all Caney circle ceremonies, is designed to be celebrated anywhere. Considering how many modern-day Tainos live in dense urban environments, all Behikes must be prepared to lead ceremonies even in a large city. This image presents an actual Equinox ceremony that took place in Brooklyn several years ago. Once all the women are in place, the rope weaving dance must be set up. As they dance, they will mark a weaving path, passing the first oncoming woman around her right, and then passing the next oncoming woman around her left. Each woman keeps dancing around in a circle, weaving in and out of all the other women who are coming after, dancing from the opposite direction. As the women dance in two opposing interweaving circles that move in opposite directions, the ropes that they are holding in their hands are being braided together above their heads. This braided length that is being created at the center of the rope cone over the head of the sitting woman begins to grow downward, getting longer and longer, with the bottom end slowly approaching the head of that centrally situated woman. The Behike continues this process over and over until she feels that the braided portion has grown to the proper length. At that point, the body of the snake is long enough. The Behike then stops the dance for the last time, and the women drop their ends of the ropes and move away from the sitting woman. They all stand a few feet away while the Behike pulls the ropes out through the hoop and down to the ground. The Behike then either ties the end of the snake body to the waist of the woman that had sat at the center of the dance circle, or attaches it to a stuffed cotton snake head effigy. Then the boa constrictor dance begins. The boa constrictor dance is a line dance. The woman who sat at the center of the weaving procedure becomes the head of the snake. If there is a stuffed snake head effigy to work with, this head woman will be holding it. If there is no snake head effigy to work with, she simply marches at the head of the line with the snake body tied to a belt at her waist. The Behike marches next to her, shaking her rattle. The rest of the women line up behind the head woman and hold on to the snake body ropes, creating a long chain of women. This line of women then marches solemnly back towards the place where the men are waiting. The men arrange themselves in a circle, standing there facing outward. They stand quietly and wait while the women march around them and form a larger circle around their tighter circle. the women have formed a wider circle facing inward around the circle of men who are facing outward, each woman picks a man facing her so that she can bless him. At this point, the Behike goes around and collects the body of the snake and the snake effigy head if there is one. She pulls these out of the circle and sets them aside away from the ceremony. The blessing takes the form of an anointing of the men's faces with red biha paint. This paint can be made from achote powder mixed with oil. The amount of achote powder should be dense enough to make the paint as red or as deep orange as possible. The biha container is passed around from woman to woman, and each woman takes her turn to paint the face of the man assigned to her.